Welcome to Mental Health Merienda, your snack-sized guide to mental health wellness. I'm Dr. Adeline Leon, licensed clinical psychologist specializing in neuropsychology.
And I'm Michelle Young, licensed clinical social worker. So for today's episode, we're going to talk about dating, the ups and the downs, and why it can feel harder than it should, and also some helpful tips on how to make the whole experience better. But first, a quick recap about us and our channel. Adeline and I are two licensed mental health clinicians, and we're also best friends. We wanted to start a channel where we can talk about mental health, break down the stigma surrounding it, and also create a community where we can explore topics from a professional and diverse lens.
To start off, as a disclaimer, this is not intended to be a substitute or replacement for individual therapy, diagnosis, or treatment from a mental health or medical professional. The information we're presenting is general and for educational purposes only. Please consult with a licensed professional if you are struggling with your mental health and well-being. And if you are in crisis, please call 911, 988, or your local crisis hotline.
So if you feel like dating feels overwhelming these days, know that you're not alone. Just to give a couple of statistics about dating. According to the US Census Bureau, 46.4% of US adults are single. And actually, I was surprised to see that number. It's almost 50%. And then this number includes divorced, widowed, and also individuals who have never been married. Another statistic from the Pew Research Center in 2019, they had done a survey, and in their survey, 67% of individuals said that their dating life was not going well, and 75% said that it had been difficult for them to find people to date. So again, that's even more than 50%, 67% of people saying it's not going well overall, and 75 saying that it's difficult to meet people in general.
Yeah, those are some really high numbers.
Yeah. So again, like you're not alone if you feel like dating hasn't been great these days. So amongst women who are single and looking to date, 65% have experienced harassing behaviors from someone that they were dating or had been on a date with. And some examples of the harassing behaviors include being touched inappropriately or having rumors spread about them after the dating had ended. So these are all pretty significant statistics. And what I'm getting from all of this is, again, dating's really hard. Dating's difficult. It's challenging. But when it comes to dating, I think sometimes our mindsets can get to us. And then that's what also contributes to feeling discouraged about our dating life. So a couple of examples that come to mind are, for example, thinking that you have to be settled by a certain age, having this arbitrary age that you have to meet someone and have to be settled and married and maybe have kids or whatever that is. I think that could contribute to that. Also, comparing yourself to other people. So comparing yourself to friends and family members who are already married or have, are in relationships and then feeling like you're behind in life.
I know that was an issue for me when I was single. It's like comparing a lot to other people and feeling like, oh, why is this not happening for me? And I think that a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah. And comparison is the thief of joy, as they say, right? So that just in general is like not good for our mental health. And then also loneliness. And actually that was something I struggled with being single, is just feeling lonely. And I think, kind of like how you were feeling, other people were paired up and then I felt like I was the only one. So all of that, those mindsets don't help at all.
When we think about modern dating, there's so many obstacles. I think that dating has likely always been difficult to some extent, but I think especially in modern times, there are different issues that have come up that make it even more of a challenge. So in heterosexual relationships, the evolution of gender roles and money in relationships. So with that, with women being much more empowered and women going to college at a much higher rate compared to men and making good money in many cases, now I think a lot of men can sometimes feel confused about whether or not to pay. Traditionally, a man would pay, and that's kind of part of the dating process. But now certain women might feel like, oh, well, I don't need you to pay for me. I can pay for myself. And then other women would feel offended if the man doesn't pay. And so that's confusing for them.
Right.
Even
and
things
for
like
a woman too, right? Like not knowing what to expect, like which kind of person you're going to expect on a date in heterosexual relationships, of course.
Exactly, in heterosexual relationships. And even things that are normally known as being very chivalrous, like holding a door open. Some women might really like that. Other women might think, well, but I can open my own door, which, yes, I can open my own door. So I
Exactly.
think things like that can be very challenging for everyone to navigate. And when you think about the time that you need to take to date, not just looking for someone, if you're doing online dating, especially, but just the time to plan a date, go out on a date, especially if you have children, you have to find childcare each time you go on a date. If you have a very demanding job and you're having to juggle that along with dating, that can be a huge challenge. And
It's
then
time
another
consuming.
it
Definitely.
is. It's time consuming. Yeah. And we all have busy lives. And, as you get older, especially, your life tends to become even more busy with family, career, etc. If you're taking care of an elderly parent, there's so many obstacles to finding that time. But especially for people who are meeting someone online, which we'll actually get into online dating specifically and dating apps in just a few minutes. But specifically to that, there's this idea where sometimes some of us still have a bit of a self stigma against meeting someone online where, oh, well, I should meet someone in real life. Sometimes we can get down on ourselves and think, oh, why do I need to go online to meet someone? I, should be able to do this in person. And so I think having that kind of negative mindset can really interfere with our ability to find the person that we're meant to be with.
Right. So, what can we do then to manage our expectations of dating and shift our mindsets? Because that's really what plays a role in how this can be so difficult, how dating is so hard these days. So, we have 5 ways that can help change your mindset, hopefully change and manage expectations of dating. So, the first one that we have is rethinking your love story, or your meet cute, as they say. Your meet
Mm-hmm.
cute. So I think sometimes people have this idea of a love story. I think we watch a lot of like romantic comedies, and certain like television shows also perpetuate this, like, oh, they met in this like very romantic way. And we have to, really rethink that. Not everyone's going to meet in that way. I mean, I'll say I didn't meet my husband. We don't have a meet cute. So we
My
don't have
husband
that
and
at
I
all.
definitely don't, which I'll get into that in a few minutes. But I think
Yeah.
people, they picture, oh, you meet at a bookstore, you meet at a coffee shop, and strike up conversation standing in line at the grocery store. And of course, things like that happen. But I would
Definitely.
imagine that for the majority of us, it doesn't.
Yeah, or you like kind of you bump in and then you do the slow motion, like take a look at each other. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I think just managing your expectations around like how you're going to meet the person that you're going to end up with is part of that, managing expectations. So the second tip that we have is to count your successes and be open-minded. So really it's about developing a growth mindset when it comes to dating. So instead of going on a bad date and thinking that was a waste of time, like why did I even spend my time doing that, developing that growth mindset where that encounter is helping you learn, it's helping you grow, it's helping you know what you want for yourself and what you want in the partner that you're looking for. So shifting your mindset into one, again, that's positive. And then a third one that we have here is embracing diversity. So instead of searching for someone who is meeting a certain checklist that you might have for yourself, or instead of thinking that you have to meet someone that shares like 100% all of your similarities and all of the exact same perspectives, being curious about, what those differences are between you and another person that you're dating, and seeing if there's any love or interest that can come in that way. And sometimes, you learn something new, like a shared interest. You develop a new interest because that your partner teaches that to you.
Mhm. I can say my husband and I,
Yeah.
we both really had to embrace diversity because on the surface we're really different people. But one
Hmm.
thing I think of is that my husband loves football. He played football in high school. He loves watching football. I don't know the first thing about football. Not real. No, I don't. I really don't. So I won't even. Yeah, I don't know the first thing about football. Have never really understood it, never really knew anything about it. But he could have easily said to himself, well, I don't want to date someone or marry someone who doesn't enjoy football. And I could have said the same thing about him. I don't want to be with someone who'll be watching football, on Sundays, every Sunday. But instead, and he watches on many Sundays, but now I watch with him and I'm learning about football. I go to football games with him.
Hmm.
And even though it won't be something that I love the same way he does. I love football and I love watching it because I love him and I want to share in that activity with him because it's something that's important to him and that he enjoys. And so I enjoy sharing that with him.
Right. So something a little bit related between like my husband and I, we both like watching sports, but we like totally different teams and sometimes like rival teams. So for
Mm.
example, if we're talking about basketball, I grew up in Los Angeles. So of course, I like the Lakers, whether they're doing well or not. I enjoy the Lakers. My husband hates them. He's from Sacramento, so he likes the Kings. And we could have easily decided not to like each other because of just and for something very like little, like that's not like a serious thing that affects our
In the
marriage.
grand
But
scheme of things,
in
it's
the grand
really
scheme
not
of things,
important.
exactly.
Yeah.
But if
Mhm.
anything, that kind of just makes us like we tease each other about it. It's just like more like funny banter between us. Again, it's liking. Some people do get very serious about the teams that they like. So maybe for some
Mm.
people that might be like a deal breaker. But I guess for us, it's not. It wasn't a deal breaker. And if anything, we did learn about each other and just learn how to like tease and banter with each other. So
Right.
yeah,
It's not really a big deal.
exactly. Another thing, I think this is an important one, is focusing on personality versus superficial qualities like height requirements. So I know some people who, might say they only want to date a man who's 6 feet tall, for example. And really height, in the grand scheme of things, I think isn't important. And, what's more important is a person's personality, your connection with them. That's, a lot more important. And then the last tip that we have is having friends set you up or expanding your social circle or being open to meeting people with a similar shared interest. So for example, here, I think this is happening everywhere, but a lot of people are interested in pickleball, for example. So if you are interested in
Mhm.
pickleball, you decide to join a league or to join a team. That's expanding your social circle. So meeting people in those natural settings where you're already interested in an activity, you're participating in it and opening yourself up to meeting someone in that way.
And what I really like about that too is that it encourages you to, in the process of looking for someone, you're
Mm-hmm.
just living life.
Yeah.
Sometimes
You're
people
just
can
having
get so
fun.
focused on that. Yeah. And
Yeah.
they almost put their life on hold and they feel like they can't do things because they don't have a partner. But not having a partner doesn't stop you from just enjoying your life and living your life. And maybe you'll find someone in the process of doing that.
Yeah, definitely. I know too, that's something that I've suggested to people that I see is, expanding your social circle. So joining like pickleball is one example, but other like fitness type activities, I know there's like hiking clubs here in Los Angeles. There's also like in real life, speed dating. Like there's all these ways that you can try to expand your social circle and meet people in real life. All right. So I know it's more common these days to use dating apps, though, to meet people to date. So I've never used dating apps, but when I think about it, I'm not sure my husband and I would have even selected each other if we were to meet on dating apps. I think we would have not swiped on each other.
I don't think you would have either.
Yeah, right? Because yeah,
Knowing
you know the
you
both of
back
us. Yeah.
then, yeah, yeah, I know you since before you met your husband, and I don't think you would have swiped right on
No,
him,
not at
even though he's
all.
great.
Yeah, exactly. I would have missed out.
And in my case, I met my husband much more recently, and I actually met him online. I met him on Bumble for anyone who's curious, and I really had to go into it with a very open mind in
Hmm.
order for me to swipe right on him. And he's shared with me a little bit, and his loved ones have too. His friends and family have shared with me the mindset that he was in right before we met, where I think if it had been just 6 months earlier, I would venture to guess that none of us would swipe right on each other because
Wow.
he needed to come to a point where he felt good about himself and good about his dating potential.
Hmm.
And I needed to get to a point where I would be a bit more open minded about dating someone who, like you said, embracing diversity, someone who on the surface was very different from me. So I'm very happy that we both got to that point at the right time.
Wow. Yeah, that's a great example of again like being in that right mindset to date online or to do
Yeah.
dating apps.
And so, even though dating apps are everywhere now, they can also have major impacts on mental health. And so, many people have experienced what's known as dating app burnout. which I think when we think about burnout, we think about it in terms of work and being
Right.
burnt out at work. But it can have actually a lot of those same elements where it's this emotional exhaustion in response to a chronic stressor. And you tend to feel very fatigued. It's emotional fatigue, physical fatigue, feeling ineffective, feeling detached from others, and feeling kind of like, oh, what's the point? Or, oh, it's not, this won't ever work. And just not really feeling very motivated. And so, in one survey done in April 2023, it said that 80% of people ages 18 to 54 endorsed emotional burnout and fatigue with online dating. So 80%, that's almost everyone. And that's a wide age range too. I was actually very surprised by that 18 to 54 age range. So definitely this is something that a lot of people experience. So if you feel that way, just know that you are definitely not alone.
Right. I'm sorry, I was still blown away by the number of 80%. So
Mhm.
that is a
Yeah.
lot. And that's also, I can see how just that the feeling of it is just really discouraging. So again, kind of coming back to how dating just, it feels so hard. It's, that using dating apps, even though it's supposed to make our lives easier, when it's not working as quickly as you want it to, it can feel really discouraging.
Yeah, it really can.
So, some factors that can contribute to dating app burnout include decision fatigue. So, the idea that you have a lot of decisions to make and you have to make more decisions and more decisions over the course of the day, and it just makes that whole experience worse. So, again, you're meeting all these people or swiping on all these different people, having to read their profile, decide whether you're going to swipe, and then decide if you're going to message them, and then decide if you're going to meet with them, and then times that by however many people you're matching with. I can see how that just can get overwhelming on top of your regular day-to-day life.
Mhm. And research shows that when you have many decisions to make, you get progressively worse at making good decisions. So that really applies to dating online, to using dating apps.
Yeah. And then another thing too is the paradox of choice. So thinking that you have a lot of options and that it requires, even again, kind of going back to the decision fatigue, you have to make decisions on who to choose. And then once you do make a choice, it makes you feel like, oh, did I make the right choice? Was there somebody better? And especially if the interaction doesn't go well, then it kind of reinforces that, like, oh, see, I did make a bad choice. I should have chosen someone else, or I should have kept swiping, or what have you.
Hmm.
And then the third thing is the gamification of dating apps. And actually, again, I've never used dating apps, but I've peeked and seen other people use dating apps, or people have shown me how they use it. And I can definitely see that you're swiping, you're seeing pictures, and it's just a constant like flow of people. And it almost feels like they're not actual people, and they are people, of course, but you're just swiping and swiping, and you're just looking at a quick image of somebody and making a quick decision whether you're going to swipe right or left. So I could definitely see how it almost feels like it's a game and that the people aren't real. And when you feel that way, when you forget that it's actual real people that you're swiping right or you're interacting with, it makes it easier for us to engage in behaviors that we wouldn't engage in real life. So ghosting is super common. People talk about ghosting all the
Hmm. So
time.
common.
Right. Yeah. And it's easier to ghost somebody if you don't like realize that they're a person. Again, if you haven't like met them in person, but that whole thing with how apps gamify dating makes it easier, or makes it seem okay to you to ghost somebody.
Mhm. And it's interesting because Tinder was the one that revolutionized the swiping concept. And I
Mhm.
believe that Tinder just recently celebrated their 10-year
Wow,
anniversary, which
10
is
years.
hard to believe. It's been around for
Okay.
10 years. Yeah, yeah. Uh, but so I think they developed that on purpose because it first makes it more enjoyable to use, but also you get that constant dopamine hit. And
Hit.
so it
Hmm.
becomes very addictive, and very similar to how social media can be very addictive and how the feed is constantly updating. And so I think they probably designed it that way. Of course, it benefits them to have many users on their apps, but also it can really bring about some of those negative behaviors that you were mentioning, Michelle, like ghosting.
Right, right.
And so, what can you do about this dating app fatigue? I'm sure that's a big reason that many of you tuned in to watch us for this show. And so, here we have five recommendations for you. First one is a little more broad, but it's more about how you present yourself online. And so, we all know that with dating apps, you have pictures, you have descriptions. Remember that that is the entry point. That's what someone first sees when they're getting to know you. And so make sure that your pictures are an honest reflection of you. So if you have pictures up that are 5 years old, where maybe you might have been a little bit thinner, we can gain a little weight as we get a little older. That's okay. Yeah. If your hair is very different, I can tell you for myself, my hair is obviously very curly. This is my naturally very curly hair. And I went through a time period where I, like many curly haired girls, I'm sure can relate. I didn't like my curly hair very much, and I always, pretty much always straightened it. So all my pictures, I had straight hair, but that's not really me. And so be honest with yourself and just know that whoever is going to choose you, you want them to choose the real you. So you want that to be an honest reflection of you.
Yeah. And I
Uh,
think too, is there like filters that you can also use? Probably not a good
I'm
idea to
sure
have
there
super
are.
filtered pictures. Cause again, you want
Mhm.
like the real you to come out.
Yeah. Yeah. I think now with a lot of the like Snapchat and all of that, there's like extra filters that you can use so that that's not really who you are. And if you're going to take any of my tips away from this is the one to take, is to practice mindful swiping. That is so, so important. Set aside a window of time where you can be fully present and engaged in what you're doing. And make sure that you stop just before you start to tire out. Because when you start to tire out, that's that burnout, that dating app
Right.
burnout that's setting in. So you want to leave that, let's call it a swiping session. You want to leave that swiping session feeling energized and not depleted. So just observe yourself. If you thought of you were swiping yesterday and you thought, oh, I got so tired, and oh, it's just terrible, oh, the people out there are just no good, and you think, well, I was swiping for about 30 minutes. Okay, so maybe tomorrow when you practice your mindful swiping, you can try it for 20 minutes, see how you feel. If you feel no, like 15 minutes, but just it'll be a little bit of trial and error because that depends on the person. It's a bit different for everyone, but that is very, very essential, I think.
Yeah. And I think that's also paying attention to how you're feeling. So again, like being present in the
Mm-hmm.
moment when you're doing something, when in this case, swiping, and paying attention to how that makes your body feel. And if it's starting to feel bad, like you're saying, then that's really, you're not going to be making good decisions. When we talked about dating app fatigue. Mm-hmm.
Yes, exactly. And so for many people, you might be watching this and thinking, you know what? I'm so discouraged. I haven't found anyone. There's no one good out there for me. I'm just going to delete these apps. I don't need this. I don't need all these tips. And that, of course, is your choice. You also have to, like Michelle just said, you have to listen to yourself and what you need. And if you're not in a good mindset to date right now, then by all means you can delete it. But if you do, there's a psychiatry professor at UC San Francisco who studies gender and sexuality, Dr. Jack Turbin. And what he encouraged people to do is to really ask yourself, why was the app causing distress in the first place? So it might have been because you're just not in the place to date right now. Maybe you had a loved one pass away and you're having a hard time. Of
Right.
course, that's understandable. But in some cases, it might be that you were using the app to potentially self soothe some anxiety, which can make your anxiety worse than with the dating app burnout. Or is it a fear of not being able to attain love, settling for more casual dating when you truly do want something more long term? And so I think what I'm saying with that is that if you do delete the app, take that time really for self reflection so that you don't go back to the apps and just continue with the same more dysfunctional habits.
All right. That's really good, actually. I like that.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. So, two other tips that we have are considering a virtual date or a quick coffee meetup. That way, you can gauge the chemistry between you and this potential person before you're committing to a more formal date where you're having to spend, a lengthy amount of time, like dinner, for example. That way, it helps you preserve your emotional resources, and it also lowers the stakes. It lowers. It doesn't. It's not as pressure. There's not as much pressure to just doing a quick virtual date or a quick coffee meetup.
The quick coffee meetup, I had a few of those, and it was, at first I thought it was a little strange that someone was just suggesting a coffee date, but actually now in retrospect it makes sense. It was a
Yeah.
nice low pressure situation, kind of like a screener somewhat, and you both
Yeah,
get to see,
screening session
yeah,
for both
yeah.
sides.
Do we want to continue with this, and do we do, okay, well, we can try an
Yeah.
actual, a more full length date, so to speak. So
Yeah. And I think when we talk about preserving your emotional resources, again, we're talking so much about how dating app fatigue, how there's a negative mindset with dating. It's really hard. So you want to really preserve your mental health as much as possible. And I think this is a good way to set up some guardrails so that you're not exhausting yourself, essentially. So, our last tip is to give yourself grace. This process of finding a life partner is a journey. It's not an easy one, and it's not meant to be an easy one. Also, when you're on that journey to find your life partner, you're looking for shared values, which again, it takes time to do that. So definitely, give yourself grace. It's not meant to be an easy journey, and it's going to take time.
So that's all that we have for today's episode. I'm Dr. Adeline Leon, licensed clinical psychologist.
And I'm Michelle Young, licensed clinical social worker.
And if you liked our show on dating and would like to see more content like this from us, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our channel so you can receive notifications when we upload our weekly episodes. And we would love to hear from you in the comments. Have you experienced dating app fatigue before? And if so, did you try any of these tips, or have you experienced any of these tips to help with that dating app fatigue? And if so, was it helpful? Make sure to let us know in the comments. We would love to hear from you.
And thanks again for tuning in to Mental Health Merienda, your snack-sized guide to mental health wellness. So see you next week.
See you next week.